It's time for WrestleShoot. The beast comes out in the dead of night. WrestleShoot eats a Tuesday night. Rob and Chris don't pull the punches, bitch. WrestleShoot. Breaking it down, WrestleShoot. Telling the facts, WrestleShoot. Stories on the road, WrestleShoot. That's our fire podcast. No Carney ever escapes their sight. Coming at you live every Tuesday night. Hey, WrestleShoot. Anti-social network, WrestleShoot. Sticky and hot, WrestleShoot. Sometimes act like jerks, WrestleShoot. Always bringing on the guts.
I know. I say it all the time, boy. But I tell you what, man, that guy no-selling it and then just swatting him down like a fly was fucking hilarious. Never stops getting me. Welcome to another episode of WrestleShoot. I'm your host, Rob Wiles, joined, of course, by the lovely and talented... Oh, that's right. That's right. Puddin's not here. Yeah, he tried to be here for today's episode, but I know he's got the flu or AIDS or fucking something. So he's not going to be able to make it. He tried to come on, and I said, no, you're going to get me. You're going to get everybody watching sick just from looking at you. So go ahead and fuck on off to bed. And he did. What I did is I reached into that bag of WrestleShoot magic, and I got ourselves a special guest co-host. That's right, baby. You never, ever want to miss WrestleShoot because you just don't know who the fuck is going to show up. But I'll tell you who's showing up today. That's right. And I'm going to mainly focus on his stardom from WCW. We'll get to WWF here a little bit, but let's bring on the great Maxx Payne.
Yo,
now, see, he looks... Go on.
I'm in the house, brother. I'm ready to go. So great to be here, man. I'm honored. I just got to know who wrote your song? Who wrote your theme song?
Do you love it?
Yo, it's fucking killer.
That's a Rob Wild's brainchild, sir.
You did that?
That's why I always related to you so much. Yeah, and even though I know that
fucking sick, Hammer. Dude. I'm totally impressed, man. I thought it was like fucking Slayer or fucking Iron Maiden mixed with. Forgive me because I loved him. It just had so many different flavors.
Yeah, I always caught a real strong, especially from the guitar, a real strong Anthrax vibe from it.
Yeah, definitely. Sure. Is that your voice?
No, God, no. I can't sing like that no more. I got COVID 3 times. Believe it or not, buddy, I was a double threat, man. I was not only a pro wrestler, but I was also front man in a band. I used to be a double.
Nice.
Now all I got to do is try stand-up comedy and see how bad I get booed out of the room on that one.
Yeah, I thought about that route myself, but I'm not sure I could take the punishment myself either. So,
I tell you, with you though,
like a whole other type of person that can do that, right?
Yeah, but with you, I wanted to do a little bit of catching up last night. So, as much as I hate the man, I listened to your show that you do with Hannibal.
Okay.
And I was really impressed because Hannibal is just a dead pig next to some egg fetuses, man. He's just worthless, I think. He's got no charisma, no personality.
Don't around the bush, Rob. What do you really think? I mean, come on.
He's okay.
Let it out.
He's all right. But you were the only one keeping his show going. And I was cracking up the whole time. I was like, Hannibal, you suck, first of all. You suck. And secondly, if you're going to bring on a star caliber personality, why don't you have some personality to give back to them, man? They can't just eat the whole turkey by themselves. But
I'm one of those guys that it's a little it's a little fearful of myself. I got to be honest with you that sometimes, all you got to do is fucking wind me up and let me go, And so I have to be very careful when I'm in the environment where I'm going to share, that I need to just shut up and listen sometimes. I work very hard on, depending on the environment. I mean, there's, I work very hard on reading the room, if you will. So, I'm just one of those guys. If all you want to do is ask me a question and let me run, well, I'll fucking do that. If you really want to probe and you want to ask some in-depth shit and you really want to know, like I've done probably 5 or 6 interviews in the last couple of weeks, and the range of personalities and people that you deal with, you have to accommodate that. So, I really work hard on trying to read the room and giving the interviewer what they want. I mean, you're obviously a completely different kind of personality. So, we can have a different kind of fun than you would with Hannibal, than you would with, a lot of the people. Some people, like I said, they really want to dig into, the nitty gritty. They want to fucking get right down and know almost dates, when you started and things like that. And I've interviewed with people before that, man, if you quote something wrong, or, that they'll call you out on it. And I appreciate that too, because, I'm not here to, the one thing I don't have to do, when you've lived a life like I have, there's no need for bullshit. It's just one of those things that the truth and the story of the road, the stories of the road and the stories of my life, I lived them because they were enough, So I don't have to go any further. So if somebody wants to know that, well, then I'll give it to you.
And the point really was not, even though I think he's a no talent hack, to bash on Hannibal. The point was to say, based on me listening to that interview, I think you could probably hold your own. Maybe go try some stand up, open mic comedy.
I've thought about it. But I'm not so much. I've thought about that, Rob. And here's the thing. I think, in fact, I believe it or not, I did a show once in a little town called Gooding, Idaho. I did a one-man show. And I realized when I did that I can't just be funny. I can't go out there with just the intention to be funny, because I think I can be funny. All right. But I think what I am more than anything is a storyteller. So if you have the patience to hear through the things I have to say, if you're not a member of the 6 Second Society, then you might have the inclination to want to sit down and hear a completely different fucking story, because I have some pretty amazing things that happened in my life that are probably, that like I had a former mother-in-law who said something I've carried with me my whole life, and I love it. She said, "You're completely and absolutely original, just like everyone else." And so I try to remember that. We all have, there's all those, this as a musician, we all have one great album in us. We all have one great book in us. And I think that maybe I might have a couple more of those things, but then again, I might just be really full of shit too.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. We were a couple of professional wrestlers, meaning we're professional liars. So you never know.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
I love that, man. There's very few people who, think of it that way. And I got to be honest with you. I was born and raised in the LDS church. I was born and raised a Mormon. And that was probably, I've never said this publicly, actually, never. But that was probably one of my biggest. Yeah, it is. It really is. That was probably my biggest dilemma. Embracing professional wrestling was being a professional liar. On top of the fact, I came from a shooting background. So, you know, when you're a fucking shooter, you know, I have actual newspaper articles from college when people would ask me if I was going to continue on to be a professional wrestler. I'd say, "Fuck you, that shit's all
Not
fake.
exactly,
I'd
but
never engage in that." You know, I had this level of pride in me because I was a shooter. You know, I wrestled for Iowa State, you know, one of the wrestling powerhouses, you know, in the world, and has been and continues to be to this day. And, you know, so when you come from that kind of a background, and actually both the schools I went to, North Idaho College, which is one of the greatest JUCO dynasties in the United States, and then Iowa State, you know, you have this sense of pride that you just, you know, you can't fuck with that. And so when I went into professional wrestling, you know, in the Mormon church, we have this saying called that still small voice in your brain that, you know, says, you know, it's like the scene in it's like the scene in Animal House when the devil and the pops on his shoulder and says, "Fucker, fucker,
grab her titties, you know? Grab her, do
that
it."
Still small voices. Yeah, right. That still small voice is the angel that goes, "If you touch a hair on her head," you know, that's so when I joined the wrestling business, but then again, then I looked at it like, you know, I formed the ability. That's why I created the name Maxx Payne, was because I grew up loving Kiss and Alice Cooper and Black Sabbath, and you know, I always thought it was such a dichotomy. Bands like Black Sabbath, on the surface, they sound so evil, but when you really start to dig deep into who Black Sabbath is, their words aren't evil at all. Their words are very uplifting and proletariat based.
But that
you
goes
know,
right
same with Alice
right
Cooper.
along with kind of what cancel culture has evolved into, right? It was the whole mothers against, like Alice Cooper, right? The root of all evil,
Right. TMRC.
absolute no talent hack, blah blah. But one of my really good
Right.
friends, is a famous musician, and one day we were, you know, burning one, and we're listening to Poison from Alice Cooper. No, who? What? Alice Cooper? Yeah, we listened to that. Oh, weed? Fuck yeah.
No, I'm talking about burning.
Yeah, fuck yeah, weed.
Yeah. I've done a few of those myself.
So we're listening to the whole Poison, or Trash rather, album from Alice Cooper, and he goes, "You know what?
Right.
If you put my guitar in my hand right now and gave me a pen and paper and said to transcribe this album, I wouldn't know where to fucking start. It's so brilliant the way they compose." And that just really spills over for, I think, all of the music at that area where the Mad Click was out to get them. So they caught a bad rap, and really Iron Maiden and Kiss figured out how to capitalize on that bad rap.
Right. Well, and I think well, if you look at Kiss, why did we love Kiss so much? Because they hid that much better. It wasn't human beings.
Right.
It was Kiss. You know, I'll never forget. I was in this little drugstore in Fortuna, California. My oldest brother had two children older than me, and my nephew, who was 5 years older than me, was my hero growing up. He had every cool fucking car you could ever imagine. And on this particular day in 1970, I believe it was 1974, I was 13, and he had a 1969 Pontiac Le Mans convertible. And it was that satin blue finish that Chevy was kind of famous for in the late 60s, right? It was fucking bad. Had a 389 in it with 4-barrel, and you know, it was just a fucking. It was, you know, today the car is probably worth $50,000 just in average shape.
But he got it for like
so
a
we
grand.
went into Bowman's drug. Yeah, if that, you know, he probably traded his Bull Taco motorcycle and a bag of weed for it, you know. So anyway, we were at this drugstore called Bowman's, and we had just installed. He had a brand new Bowman 8-track, and like any good stereo installer of the day, we put 5.5-inch round speakers in the door, and he just shoved his screwdriver through one of the speakers, and then we fixed it with toilet paper and silicone. You know, I don't know if you ever did that when you were a
Dude,
kid.
old school.
Every time you stuffed your fucking screwdriver through the speaker, you fixed it with toilet paper and silicone, right? So we were in this drugstore, and they had one of those old 8-track display cases, which was like, you know, it had holes like this big in it where you could just barely get your hand in. Tape wouldn't come through. Did you ever see those when you were younger? Were you around? Are you young enough to have been around during the 8-track era?
Dude, so anyway, I remember my mom popping on her Bee Gees 8-track like it was the thing to do.
Right, exactly. So anyway, we're in there, and this case was amazing. And we're, you know, he goes, I'm going to start at Z, you start at A, we'll meet in the middle, looking for something new to listen to. You know, at the time we're listening to Uriah Heep and David Bowie and Alice Cooper and Black Sabbath. And, you know, we were going through all of the classics of the time. We just listened to Rick Wakefield the night before, Journey to the Center of the Earth. And it was the first time I'd ever been stoned on hash, and it was just an amazing day, and we were going to go get stoned again. And so we're looking for that perfect 8-track to drive around and listen to in this Le Mans. And I got to H and I and J and nothing, you know, there's just, you know, it was mostly country and, you know, mild rock, and, you know, and all of a sudden I'm going through K and it's Kinks, and I see this tape, and all it's got is one word on it, and it's Kiss. And I will never forget pulling that fucking tape out and seeing those 4 faces on that cover and going,
the original?
Holy, yeah, the original album, the first album, my favorite album, quite honestly. It's, you know, from a rock standpoint, there's not a bad song on that album. That's why Kiss was so successful, is because, you know, their first 3 albums.
I feel like that was the story for Kiss all the way up until Hot in the Shade. That whole album was garbage. The next album was garbage. But up until then, like, their first 6 albums were amazing.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll be honest with you, even Destroyer, there's going to be Kiss fans out there going, what? Even Destroyer, and I love Bob Ezrin because of his, you know, influence on Alice Cooper. And, you know, he's just one of those producers that's out of this fucking world. But man, the first Kiss album, you know, it's so funny, is one of the greatest songs on the first Kiss album is a song called Kissin' Time. And because they hadn't wrote that song, they never pushed it. But I always thought that was one of the best songs on the album because it said it sang about them, you know. But I pulled that tape out, and I started having a dream from that day forward about playing the guitar and couldn't play it. And then it eventually
manifested. Hilarious.
Yeah, it changed later in my life. That dream finally went away. But that moment of pulling that Kiss 8-track out of that, you know, I mean, as you can plainly hear, I mean, it changed my life. I mean, because I was already in love with Cooper and Bowie and a band called the New York Dolls. And you know, they fucking changed. In fact, they were truly, most people don't realize it. They don't get it. They don't get the credit they deserve, but they were truly the first punk band. You know, they fucking revolutionized rock and roll and the look of rock and roll. They were the first genuinely hardcore androgynous rock band, and I loved them. And so when I saw Kiss and they took it to that level, I went, oh, fuck yeah, let's hear what this sounds like. And then we you know, from the first moment you hear blicka, 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 you're hooked, you know.
You know, it's funny because Gene Simmons was why the sole reason up until Cliff Burton why I picked up bass.
Right.
So that's right. We have that in common. But hey, listen, let's shift gears here real quick to wrestling, because I've always questioned, and who am I to question them? I'm a Payne fan sometimes. I've always kind of questioned the McMahon's booking and why they do what it is they do. And more specifically in your case. So they courted this guy,
Yeah.
right? They
Yeah.
wanted this fucking guy. And then
Yep.
they signed you, and instead of this guy, they presented this more goofy, red haired rendition with a badass fucking guitar. It's a shame you don't still have that bad boy, but like when you took that job with them and they hit you with, this is what we want to do you with, did that make you immediately think, God damn, I never should have left WCW? Or were you like, I'll give it a try and see if I can over?
You know, the story behind all of this is, you know, it's long and convoluted, and I made a lot of mistakes. You know, and the biggest mistake I made is I should have said "fuck you" and walked out. I'm way too much of a. The biggest reason I'm still not in the wrestling business is I, I'm I'm too much of a pussy. I'm too much of a pacifist. I don't have the tenacity to stand up to the likes of the clique, even though I tried. And I actually, the truth of the matter is I'm not done with this movie I made yet. Its anniversary was yesterday. 30 years ago, I shot this movie that I've talked about called
Yeah.
The Thing That Should Be. And videotape doesn't lie. And you can see how badly the clique hated me at the time. But it wasn't just, in fact, it wasn't Vince who was against me. It wasn't Vince at all. It was all the guys behind the scenes that just fucking hated me. You know,
Yeah.
Scott Hall, Razor,
Now,
Triple
see, that's
H.
funny. I actually asked Scott about you once, and
Uh-huh.
he goes, I said, Man Mount Rock, how to go with him? And he goes, oh, Max Payne. Yeah. No, I wasn't very nice to him, but he was a cool enough guy. Like, oh, okay. So Scott, when
Yeah,
he
see that.
moved away from wrestling, he got honest with himself about a lot.
Well, let me just say this about Scott. Or are you talking about Scott or Kevin?
Scott.
Yeah. Well, you know what's funny is out of everybody, Scott was the meanest to me. He really set forth, and you know, at least Kevin and Triple H did it to my face. I mean, in the movie, you'll see that. You know, Triple H pulls no punches against me, and neither does Scott or Kevin. But Scott, you know, I met Scott in Japan originally when I was a young boy leaning on the New Japan, you know, apron, watching wrestling matches up close. And Scott was an American that they'd brought in and paid well, you know, to be there. And you know, he befriended me and he was kind to me. And I met him in Memphis, and I thought he was somebody that would, you know, that we could be friends. And he made it very clear that the only reason he was nice to me in Japan is because he'd hoped that it would do him some other favor in Japan. Because
Help
when I
him
met
out.
him in Memphis, he started to, you know, he started to turn his back on me. And you know, I when you can tell, I don't care who you are, you can tell when somebody dislikes you. You know, you don't gravitate towards them. And so
Right.
from that moment forward, once I came to America, Scott Hall wanted nothing to do with me at all. And you know, on top of the fact that I was, wow, what a fucking freak I was, like in Memphis, like you just showed. You know, I you know, the first time Lawler put me on television, you know, I had the long black coat. I painted my face. You know, I was trying to get the Motley Crue / Alice Cooper black #1 hair. You know, I'd always wanted that in my life. Like we were talking about earlier, the thing that I loved about the way I sublimated my energy and justifications for lying about the business was, this is an act. I get to be whatever I want to be. And so when I got to create that Max Payne character, wow, the wrestling business wasn't ready for that guy yet. You know, they weren't ready for the fucking, you know, the Motley Crue, fucking black haired, you know, guitar playing lunatic that I was. And at my initial stages, I still hadn't embraced the guitar yet as part of my gimmick. And so, yeah, you know, it was guys like that, you know. So when you ask the question of, so what happened, I had, well, first of all, in the WCW, I had this mountain of people and incidents against me that, you know, and you know, a lot of people, I don't like to use this word jealousy, because the first thing that anybody like that would go, what is there to be jealous of? And so you know, how do you argue with that? You know, Maxx is a fat, ugly motherfucker that's no happening, ain't a good wrestler, blah, blah, blah. That would be their comebacks for, you know, everything you do. And as somebody who has PTSD for the way I was treated in the WWF and the WCW, you know, because I, like you, I never understood, because every time, with the exception of one, when I should have said, no, I'm not going to do this, every time I played the guitar in front of people, I got fucking, the crowd went nuts. And I got such amazing response from that. So I never understood, because I always thought the whole point of wrestling was to make money. And so I never understood why they wouldn't want to make money with a freak that could make them money. It's the classic example. I think the best way to describe what happened to me, if you want the quintessential definition of why I failed in the wrestling business, and I've really worked my whole life to sort of define this, Rob, is when I played the national anthem at Super Brawl, had Bill Watts been the kind of promoter he was, if he would have been watching the fucking monitor in the gorilla position, when I first started playing the national anthem, the crowd booed me. And within about 10 to 15 seconds of me playing the national anthem, they start going, oh, wait a minute, this guy's fucking really playing the guitar. He's really doing this. This is a wrestler that's not fake. It's the real fucking deal. And this 6 foot fucking 350 pound fucking lunatic is standing in front of us playing guitar. And they turned into babyface loving Maxx Payne. And had Bill Watts been the kind of promoter he should have been right there, he would have gone, Vader, get your ass out there, fucking knock that motherfucker off the stage, bust his guitar into a million pieces. Don't worry about it. We'll repay Maxx for the fucking guitar, but you get your ass out there and fucking destroy him. We're going to run all the way across the country with this. Because when I finished the national anthem, they fucking blew up fucking rockets and Jesse Ventura fucking, and then I tore into Purple Haze for Jesse, and the fucking crowd went nuts. Then they send me out there to wrestle the biggest babyface in the company at the time, Dustin Rhodes, and the fucking people sat on their hands because I just played the national anthem. I just played. It's not like I was Roseanne Barr and they were booing me because I did it so shitty. They fucking just cheered me, right? They're out there fucking cheering me. Now you send me out to wrestle in a babyface match. Fuck, you could have heard a fish fart in the fucking arena that night. And from that moment forward, my destiny was sealed. You know, the WCW only let me play the guitar publicly twice. The first one was the national anthem, and the second one was because they needed to fill 3 minutes and they didn't know what to do, so they sent me out there to play. And somewhere there's footage of me playing that could prove what I'm saying. I played my song, and the crowd went fucking nuts. And I'm like, how do they not see that the crowd loves it when I do this? How am I missing with everybody backstage? And then the same thing, I went to the WWF, and instead of them embracing the unique musician that was me, and instead of them embracing, oh, you can't do the dark thing. Taker already does that. But Taker doesn't fucking play the guitar. Taker doesn't fucking hang out with Slayer. Taker doesn't, Taker's Taker. God, he's fucking an icon. He for in the history of wrestling, he's fucking. There's probably very few people that you could put in the caliber of Hogan, and Taker's
a lot of people's careers
in fact,
crashed because of Undertaker, not because he did anything. It's because of what you just said.
Right.
Like, look at what was it, Damien Demento, right? He was a solid worker, but he was just running up Undertaker's skirt, and Vince didn't like it.
Yep. And that's why I said to Vince, I'm not in competition with Taker. I could run at his side, man. I could fucking introduce him in the ring, playing his music. Are you fucking kidding me? You got me wrong. I'm not. He's the dead man. Nobody can compete with Taker. Nothing's gonna take away from Mark. Mark is Mark. He is fucking. The shit he's done is so iconic. Who the fuck would even try to compare with that? I could only compliment that, or I could only work against Mark, and have a great run, and then we end up doing something together. That was always what my vision was, and everybody got in Vince's head, and I heard it when I went to play at Madison Square Garden one night, and Vince put me. And this is what I was saying, Rob. This is one of those times where I should have said no. I should have just adamantly said, I am not fucking going out there embarrassing myself like this. I'm not going to fucking do it. And he tried to make me play my guitar in front of the Madison Square Garden audience through the local PA. And it failed, and I got booed off the stage because I couldn't myself play.
No, they didn't
they booed me because... No, fuck no. And then on top of that, dude, I'm telling you, Rob, I played in front of MSG with a system I wouldn't have played in a bar with 100 people for. I had one Marshall amp in front of me, one monitor, and I was all by myself, and they were trying to run it through the PA. Well, when the crowd started to get loud in Madison Square Garden, because initially they popped, I could not hear anything. I could not hear a fucking sound. And what should have happened is the first time I debuted should have been on a stage with a stage like a fucking rock band would have, and a PA like a rock band would have, in a crowd of 18,000 people. You can't go out there and play. I mean, besides that, no matter how good MSG's sound system was in-house, it wasn't meant to support a rock act. They don't turn the fucking house system on in MSG when fucking, forgive me, Kiss is playing. Kiss uses their own PA, and that's what I needed. And I should have said no. I should have said, at that moment in time, I'm not going to go do this. I'm not going to go out there and embarrass myself.
That's so funny that you keep saying that you should have said no. Because that really, and I wanted to bring this up a couple of times. I'm sorry to cut you off, but there was a time, a long time ago, that a particular promoter, I'm not going to drop his name because he was just a big bag of stupid. I did not know what he was doing. But he calls me and goes, hey, if I was to get Maxx Payne, do you want to work him? Well, right then, I was on this really high babyface run. Like, I was white meat at the time. But the problem was our looks were just too similar. I said, you can't bring Maxx Payne in and say, go out there and get the booze. Of course he's going to get the pop. He's from TV. The fucking names always get the pop. You've been pushing me in your own territory as a baby. So what do you want me to do? Go out there and heal up on Payne and blow what we've been doing? Because let me bring this up. So this was my look. So and you could see that this was a good reason to have said no back then.
Oh, there you go. Okay, better. Okay.
So
yeah, exactly. No, so I get it, of course.
And I said no to a name. And he was like, I can't believe you're saying no. I can't believe you would honestly ask me to book this. Nobody's going to make any money. That's going to put me behind the eight ball and all the work I've been doing. And who's going to really scream, even though he's on TV, for Maxx over me when I just saved a girl gimmick, when I just saved her a week ago. Come on, dude. It's bad gimmick. I said, book him. Book me with him. Let's tag team. Let's do something like that. And he's like, oh, welcome to you.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Which would have been good.
Well, and you know, so that was so, you know, and then I was driving down, Mick and I needed a ride to a town. We were going from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, and so we were riding with the office this particular day. I think it was Greg Gagne and
Dude, bummer.
Oh, Mike and what was his last name? And then Bill Dundee was in the car with us. It was a little minivan, and Mick and I were in the back seat, and they started talking about us and the fact that running against the Nasty Boys, we were baby faces. And that's because the Nasty Boys were fucking great heels, man. You know, the people really fucking, they were good at their craft. And, you know, so we're running down the road, and these guys we're talking to them. I'll never forget Bill Dundee turning around and looking at both Mick and I and saying, how can two fat, ugly fuckers like you think you could ever get over as baby faces? And how do you come back from that? And I remember Mick valiantly trying
Who said
to
that,
defend
Dundee?
himself. And I thought,
fuck
Dundee. And I thought, you know, well, but you know what, man? That the reason I'm, purveying that story to you is because that's what I dealt with. That look at what happened at Super Brawl. Like I said, any fucking great promoter would have looked at the fucking monitor and gone, "This guy isn't a heel. The crowd fucking wants to love him. He plays the guitar. Why don't we utilize it?" They did all the preliminary things. That was amazing. I don't know if you've ever seen Norma Jean's Blues, but they did this preliminary thing where they took me to center stage and they built this platform that had fans underneath it, and I played my guitar and they had lights shining down on me, and I just improvised and played this my little song, a cappella and the intro for it. And they fucking played it on Saturday night television and everything. So it looked like they were really going to utilize the guitar part of me as my gimmick, because Van Hammer, the only thing he knew how to do, and he didn't do that very well, was carry the guitar around. And, so that's why they created the Van Hammer character, because, again, it was their kind of answer to Honky Tonk Man,
Right.
Really?
Sammy Hagar was their answer to Elvis? Yeah. Go figure.
Yeah, that was truly their answer, was Van Hammer. And, he couldn't play, so it didn't matter. And so here comes the guy that can really play.
Honky can't play a chord.
No, he didn't know a note. He couldn't play a note. It was so funny. And I'll never forget. I'll tell you, this is one of my favorite stories. When I finished the national anthem that night, and I walked off the stage, there were two people standing at the curtain waiting for me. The first one was Chris Benoit, because I lived in Japan with Chris. Chris and I broke in the New Japan dojo together. We were roommates for almost a year, and then went back in that same year together on different tours and stuff. And so we were really close, because we had, like I said, we were in the same. It's like the dojo, the New Japan dojo is like a boarding house. It has a bunch of rooms in it and one bathroom, collective bathroom that everybody uses. So Chris and I lived in this one big room together. And wow, what an experience. Even telling the story, it's so amazing. I can remember the smell and the cook and just the whole layout of the whole fucking thing. And so Chris Benoit was the first guy I met coming through the curtain, and tears streaming down his cheeks, and he fucking just threw his arms around me and went, "Oh my God, Max, it was so fucking amazing." And you know who the next guy was? Harley Race.
Oh, man.
Tears streaming down his fucking cheeks. And he came up to me, and Harley was known. Anybody who knows Harley knows this is true. he was known for a fucking handshake like a fucking vice. And he didn't fucking play into the fucking office handshake bullshit. When you shook Harley's, you shook that motherfucker for real. And he came over to me, and from that moment forward, whenever Harley shook my hand, he shook it like the lightest office you could ever imagine. And he reached out to shake my hand, and he gave me the office handshake. I'm getting goosebumps. I'm about to tear up myself. Tears rolling down his cheeks. And he looked at me and he goes, "Holy fuck, you can really play." I'll never forget.
Yeah,
it,
to grab Harley's attention, that's a feather in the cap forever.
Harley loved me, and he fought with Eric Bischoff over and over again. He tried. That's, in fact, he got my Saturday night matches with Vader booked. I would have loved to fucking worked with Leon. Oh my God, I would have given anything to go the road.
That's a hard
with
day's
Leon,
work, though, right
because
there.
he and I. Oh yeah, but you know what? He was very, he treated me differently, because we would have fucking fought and we would have beat the fuck out of each other. Don't get me wrong, and I would have loved that, because being a shooter, I wasn't afraid to take his fucking shit and his punches and fucking slams and shit, So but the thing about Leon with me, and if you watch the couple of matches we had on Saturday night, he was very fucking giving to me. He gave back to me, and we had some fucking, I thought they were great fucking television matches. But again, I was by then, Eric Bischoff hated me so bad. Nash and Hall and all the fucking people around Bischoff and the Nasty Boys, after I hurt Knobs, they were all in his head, telling him what a piece of shit I am. And Bischoff has never hesitated a second to go on the air and completely and utter annihilate me. He never opens his mouth that he doesn't. He's even said that I stink, and anybody knows me. I'm like, when I was in the wrestling business, man, like one time, and this is where Scott Hall came in. One time I was going down the road, and I had a T-shirt on, and it was so covered with ink that the ink had this very distinct smell on it, and if I perspirated behind it at all, it activated that ink. And we were traveling down the road together, and this shirt started to reek. And what could I do? I mean, I even apologized to him. I said, "Dude, I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on with right now." And that was one of those times where he went out in the world and bashed me about being stinky. And anybody who knew me knew I still have half of my cologne bottles. I probably had 100 bottles of cologne. I was like this cologne fanatic. So everything I put in my hair smelled good. I'm a bitch in man's clothing, man. I love smelling good and putting good smelling shit on. I'm not afraid to identify with my bitch side. Anybody who knows me knows I'm as metrosexual as it gets. And I can't even imagine offending somebody because of my smell. And Eric Bischoff has gone out publicly and talked about how bad I stink. In fact, he said I smelled like 100 tons of garbage. And that's
a very
wow,
specific number.
Nice. But then, that's what I thought. At least it wasn't like 89 tons of garbage, because it's that extra 11 tons that makes the significant difference of how much fucking worse I smelled than 89 tons of garbage, But that's what happened to me from the beginning. And by the time I got to the WWF, and then there's a whole nother behind the scenes story that happened that you don't know about, that I if you want to continue on talking about it, I will, but it takes a while to tell the story, because it involves the rock star Steve Miller. And that's a whole story.
Let's not get into that right now, because, brother, I mean, we're getting low on time right now, and I do want to get into that Steve Miller shit. Did some research on that, and that's really ultimately what got you fired from Vince was Miller. Yeah,
it is.
That's definitely something we need to get into. But
Well, I'll come
Hey,
back,
yeah,
man.
and give Chris a chance. He was really bummed out
I'll
that he
come back
missed it.
anytime you want, brother.
So let's get into what do you got to plug, man? How's your movies? How's your albums? What do you got to talk about that you're about to put out?
So I'm really excited because, like I said, yesterday, it was the 30th anniversary of me taking my camera on the road. And it's so funny because, from the moment I took the camera, everybody tried to stop me. Oh, fucking Vince will never let you do that.
I would imagine, yeah.
I never forget when I got off the fucking plane and got onto the WWF plane, I was rolling my camera and Gurria was on there. And he said, turn that fucking thing off. Vince will never put up with that. I said, Vince is the one that told me I could do this. He said, bullshit. I said, go ask him. And Vince, Tony, of course, diligently ran and called Vince, and which was his job. I'm not taking the piss out of Tony, because in the end, you'll see when the movie does finally come out, Tony fucking Gurria is an absolute superstar in this movie. He is so goddamn funny. His personality comes out so amazingly. He tells great jokes. He's just the greatest agent. And he goes, I'll be right back. So he goes and calls Vince, and he comes back and he said, okay, Vince said you could do this. And so anybody who doesn't believe that the WWF gave me permission, then you're a moron, because if they hadn't there's no fucking way I would have carried a camera on a WWF tour bus without their permission. Anybody who knows anything knows. Exactly, right? I mean, so the great thing is I've always wanted to release it. It's when I say this, Rob, it's going to sound like, look, I don't know how else to say it. Prophetically, I teased it back in 2005, and I was going to release it if the interest was big enough. And I really felt the need to do that. But somewhere inside of me, I always envisioned this story about an old wrestler telling a story about a young wrestler that tried to make it to the top and failed. And I always prophetically believed that was me. And hence the reason the name of the movie was The Thing That Should Not Be, because I'm the thing that should not be. Because when I went, that's my homage. That's an homage to Metallica, and because I'm such a Master of Puppets fan, that's my favorite Metallica album. And so when I went on the road, and like you said, this is a story for another time. But when I went on the road to go on the Full Metal tour that was built for me to go on and play, they weren't going to let me play because I'd already been fired. They had me on the very bottom of the card, and by then, even the brochure they printed had me as an afterthought because I was already fired. I knew prophetically that which to this day, I'd never understood why Vince said yes to the camera, knowing they'd already fired me. I was already done going on this last tour, but they let me take my camera and shoot locker room footage behind the
blackmail
scene.
Going?
Like, what do you think I'm there? See, that's not it's so funny, because my thoughts, again, I'm a bit of a purist. That's not what my thoughts were. I wanted Vince to see how the crowd reacted to me playing, because I knew if they would let me play, the crowd would fucking dig it. I knew I could. I never played in front of an audience, never, outside of that one time in Madison Square Garden when I should have said no, that I didn't get an overwhelmingly positive reaction from playing. And so I took the video camera with me for one reason and one reason alone. I wanted to prove to the world that had the WWF given me a true shot at being who I really, really was, they could have made money that they never even imagined even with Hogan, because I could have really bridged the gap. I wanted to be the Paul Schaefer, if you will, of the
Yeah.
WWF, the one guy who was a legitimate musician. But when I got to the WWF, like you said earlier, by the time I got to there, they had a guy named Jim Johnston who was so jealous of me, he wouldn't let me play my guitar. Every fucking time you ever saw me, the only time I was ever playing my guitar was when we were going to the ring and I had to play to his fucking backtrack, and it was just a blues riff in A, and it was 1-4-5 in A, and it was easy to do, but it wasn't mine. It was Jim Johnston's. It sounded like shit. It wasn't metal. It was fucking pussy blues rock and roll. And then every promo they ever did, every fucking thing, it was always Jim Johnston. And it was, he had this fucking, he was one of those guys who didn't have a fucking clue what heavy metal tone was. And he would always use this doubler on the guitar, and it just sounded like ass. His fucking guitar tone was the shittiest guitar tone I'd ever heard. And so it crushed me. And so when I took my camera with me, my whole point was to say to Vince, look at this. But I knew when I walked off the stage in Zurich, Switzerland, Kevin Nash was standing at the curtain. And in Germany, when you play and you're successful, they chant, "Zu Gaben, Zu Gaben." And I'm telling you, when a crowd does that, it is so motherfucking unbelievable to hear and feel a crowd chant. That's their way of getting you to play an encore.
Yeah.
Right?
I heard.
It means
I heard Hasselhoff talking about that once on an interview.
Right. I'm getting goosebumps.
That's cool.
Actually.
That's
so, I was walking off the stage and the crowd's still chanting for me. I'm walking out of the ring. I just played 2 songs. That's again a whole nother story. It took me a long time to tell the whole thing. But the very last time I played in Zurich, Switzerland, I'm walking off the stage. The crowd's still chanting "Zu Gaben." Kevin Nash is standing by the curtain. He watched the whole thing. And as I walked by him, he said to me, "Yeah, it's never going to work, Max." And I'm like, I looked at him at that moment. I said, "Did you not hear what I just heard?" And he just hung his head and walked off. He didn't respond.
Nash is definitely an acquired taste.
Well, yeah, there's something to be said for that. I'm not going to bash. I'm not going to sit and bash on Nash. He just didn't like me, and it's funny. Every time I see him, I'm always kind to him and I always talk to him. And right now I have the greatest empathy for him in the world because I can't imagine dealing with what he's dealing with in his life. So, he's got his own personal struggles, and, Kevin, it's funny. I always have liked Kevin's work in television and film.
Yes, me too.
He's a good actor. I loved him in The Longest Yard. I watched a movie about him in a Humboldt County movie that was just fucking amazing. And every time he acts, he's Magic Mike.
Yeah.
I like
Kevin's work. Every time fantastic performer. Let me share this with you. You really tell me if this sums up Nash perfectly. So myself and Casanova booked Kevin to come down and work a show we were doing, and he showed up. And I had literally had a full knee reconstruction like 3 days prior to this show, but I still did. I'm there on a cane. Kevin shows up, starts being typical Kevin fashion, right? When I booked him, I said, "Look, man, because you're charging so much, we're going to do a quick meet and greet for VIP ticket guys in the beginning of the show. You're going to sign an autograph for him. I'll provide the pictures." Okay. Well, when we open the doors, they start coming in. He's telling them $20 for a signature to the VIPs who paid extra. So that's how it started with Kevin. And he was just kind of walking around with a chip on his shoulder until all the other boys started showing up and pulling the little kids listening to Grandpa. They were literally sitting on the fucking floor in the back, and Nash is holding court. He's standing up there telling stories, making fun of like Triple H and Shawn, and just really having a good time. And he's really keeping the locker room morale up. And I was still irritated because of the $20 thing. So I'm standing in this breezeway
Mhm.
between the venue and the locker room. And I said, Kevin, what are you doing, man? You knew what the deal was. And he starts with the, you know how much I get paid? Like, yeah, I know how much you get paid. I just fucking paid you. What do I care about how much anybody else pays you? And then he stood up really aggressively at me when I was on a cane. So I kind of took a little bit of a step back. At that same time, Chris, Mr. AIDS patient, was walking out towards the locker room of the venue when he saw this happening. You know, in gymnasiums, you hear the shoes squeak on their sprints. That's what his shoes did as he bolted over next to me. And I'm like, oh shit, Kevin. There's two of us. You got two bad knees, and Scott's not here to back you up. How do you want to move forward? And he left. Now, he did a really lazy match, of course. But then at the end of the night, as I was like, I'll be the professional. Kevin, thanks for coming out. He looks at my knee and goes, when did you have that done? I said, 3 days ago. He goes, Jesus. And he pulls out his bag and he opens it and pulls out a knee brace. I says, slide that on. How's that feel? I slid it on. It immediately took pressure off the wrong places. Like, oh my God. He goes, look, that's for you. Okay, so moving forward in life, tell people Kevin Nash is an asshole because I am. But also tell them he gave you a $500 knee brace. And that experience is Nash, in my opinion, as a whole, from how I know him.
That's the part that's, you know, and that's, you're so 100% fucking right, because when you finally get to see, now that's such a great segue because it's right back to the thing that should not be, is that in the movie, I'm getting goosebumps. You know, when I went to do this movie, I'd already written the soundtrack for the movie. I already wrote the album, and that, again, another big fucking story. To get to where the point where I'd written all of these songs that were part of that. You know, that's just the way my mind worked, because I have a degree in television and film, and I started in old, and that's all I ever wanted to do. My whole life was make movies. That's it. I mean, my whole life was devoted to the reason I went back to college was to get a degree in television and film so I could move to LA and be a movie star and, you know, start my career. And then, you know, it just goes on and on and on. So I had planned. And when you see this movie, I'm hoping that it comes out the way I finally decided the only way this is going to happen is I'm going to relinquish control of it, because it's so near and dear to my heart. And when you see it, you'll understand why. It's very fucking personal, because it's me dealing with the fact that I know that when I step off the plane in Salt Lake City the last time, I'm done in the wrestling business. I know it. I fucking know it. And so it's a very personal take on me, and all the things that happened in that movie I'd already prepared for, and I in camera edited basically an entire 2-hour movie while I was on the road in Germany. And I'm looking back in retrospect, I made all the things happen, from charging batteries to, you know, everything. I mean, I couldn't fuck up and leave my camera on accidentally, because if a battery went dead, I didn't know how I was going to charge the batteries again.
Yeah.
And so luckily I figured out how to do it while I was there, and it worked out okay, because I shot this thing, but and so the whole time I was doing this, I was thinking of the movie, the soundtrack, and all the ancillary things that went with it. So I was prepared to release it. And prophetically, somehow, at some point in time, I really realized that there was going to be a perfect time for it to come out, and it wasn't in the near future. It needed to wait, because it was so far ahead of its time at the moment. And I'm not trying to brag, because there was a television show that had just came out called Road Rules, and it was the first reality TV show, and I believed with all my heart that the really interesting shit of wrestling was what you see on the other side of the curtain. You know, to me, that was the part that I thought, well, this is the part that once fans can see that now, they're gonna fucking flip at how. I mean, it's gonna create a whole different kind of wrestling base. Yeah. But it took. What's amazing is this year, Triple H released Unreal in the WWF, and it completely. Have you seen that? Have you seen it?
The Triple H.
It's fucking
the Triple H Stroke Me show.
Yeah, well, but you know what? What's amazing about that? I will give you an insight. The most poignant scene in the movie, in my movie, not the most poignant, but one of the most powerful scenes in the movie, and the only scene where the boys talk about their matches openly, is Triple H asked me if he could carry the camera. And I said yes. And so I followed behind him, and he goes in the dressing room, and Bam Bam and Yokozuna and $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase are planning their match, literally going over the high spots up to the finish, and they don't pull any punches because Triple H is the one carrying the camera at this moment. Whenever I walked by people that were planning their matches, they stopped talking about the intimate details. The only time that they actually, so I am hoping the guy that ends up doing this puts on the screen camera work compliments of Paul Levesque, because that's the moment when the business actually, you get to see the real side of the business. And that's exactly what the WWE, it's ironic that in 2025 Unreal comes out, and you know, like I said, prophetic moment, timing, all of that. That's why this year, or the beginning, you know, in the near future, now my movie can actually come out. And the reason that I was blackballed in the business was because of the movie. Everybody who blackballed me and turned their backs on me, all my friends that, you know, said, well, we couldn't like you anymore. You shot a movie behind the scenes, you know. So all of those guys now, they don't have to hide behind that anymore. They can't hide behind that anymore because Triple H has now done it in the WWF at levels that the wrestling business, it doesn't matter. Finally, I said to Vince in Madison Square Garden in his office in MSG, I said to him, man, one of these days you're going to have the courage to, this is who I was, you're going to have the courage to completely expose the business, and maybe the business can go to a different plane. Well, now it can. Now it's not, nobody gives a shit because you just exposed every single detail of putting a belt on somebody and having faith in somebody to carry the belt. It's going to boil down to how well you can keep the secret behind the scenes, you know, so that it doesn't get exposed before you go to WrestleMania. And they're really good at that. So, you know, people, the only part of the wrestling business that exposed, but now that's the only part that they will have to work very diligently at to keep secret, so that when they do things, the crowd doesn't know it before it happens.
Sure.
So,
well, listen, brother, on that, we are going to have to take this home. We're already well over our time. We got to get you back here soon. I will definitely be in touch. We got so much other shit to talk about, and I know Chris has got some questions for you as well. So, with that being said, dude, I'm so happy you came and hung out with me today, and we'll do it again soon. Guys, this is the Antisocial Network. You're watching WrestleShoot. Hit us up on YouTube at ASN for Life, just like the click for, that was NWO for Life. Subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Don't give us a thumbs down, because you all know what's going to happen. Doug Damien from Ghosted runs our thumbs down department. He's got lots of knives, and he hates thumbs down. Always give us a thumbs up. It's just healthier that way. With that being said, I'm Rob Wilds. That's Maxx motherfucking Payne hanging out with us on WrestleShoot, and we will see you guys shortly.